market as well.
Yes, I mean, I think the lack of business model innovation is certainly a major cause for concern. The Australian mindset, unfortunately, has a greater problem in not even thinking about how to take advantage of these markets and these opportunities. Frankly, the emerging scenario, which seems to indicate that there will be a very long period of stagnation in the Western developed markets of the US and Europe, means even more so that we need to think more creatively about taking advantage of markets such as India and China. And one of the issues, I guess, is that perhaps the conventional strategy of shipping out your standard product into these markets, clearly that works in the resources sector, but tends not to work in too many other sectors. And for the non-resources parts of our economy in Australia, we really owe it to ourselves and our shareholders to take heed. Otherwise, we will genuinely suffer from the travails of a two-speed economy.
What's your view on partnering? Is it essential to setting up a business in emerging markets?
Very good question. It may not be essential to partner, but you certainly have to have your antennae up to think about the need for partnering. And clearly, the more successful players who play well in emerging markets tend to be fairly adept at knowing when to and how to partner. In some cases, the need for having a local partner is almost regulated, such as in retail and at present even in the higher education sector. But what I advocate is that the partnership should be driven not so much by the regulatory requirements, but by the underlying strategic rationale. And it really boils down to two dimensions of thinking about how difficult that task is, which is really then a function of other sub-variables such as the level of investment and the level of risk and uncertainty required, as well as the specialization of skills required to pull off that venture. And on the other dimension, thinking about the organizational complexity, the compatibility between the partners and the number of partners, as well as the degree of understanding between the partners about what the end game will be. The other point is that even if you do partner, you must recognize that the eventual end game may well involve, beyond a period, even if it's 10, 15, 20 years, that the end game may well involve a separation. So it's best to plan ahead and think through that end game.
Should there be concerns about the regulatory hurdles that may be germane to a particular sector across the board, and how best to deal with them?
Yeah, good question. Look, I think if I could make a provocative statement, I would say that quite often the headline issues about regulations are overblown and overstated. And if the boardroom at the HQ is focused on the strategic opportunity and really interested in participating, then there are often very relevant and practical ways of managing around those regulations. Take retail as a case in point. I would provocatively argue that despite all of the hoopla and media hype about FDI regulations in the retail sector in India, the bulk of the opportunity, particularly in the value end of the retailing in supermarkets and hypermarkets, is, I would argue, largely game over. And major entrants like Walmart, for example, have been able to fairly easily circumvent the FDI regulations and have already been here for a good couple of years and are building a substantial position. So I think quite often my advice to the corporate boardrooms would be is to not be put off by the regulatory environment. By all means, be aware of it, but if your underlying focus and intent, and if there's an underlying economic rationale for what you want to do, then there are often ways to structure the deal to overcome those regulatory hurdles.
You mentioned retail. What other sectors present big opportunities for foreign investment?
India, in addition to its energy and food security needs, has a massive, massive unmet need for providing vocational training and job skills training to anywhere between 10 to 20 million people, young people per annum. And there is a tremendous multi-billion-dollar wealth creation opportunity for those higher education institutions that can find a creative business model to deliver that type of skills training inside India, because it's simply not going to be practical for that quantum of students and at their relatively low income levels to be able to afford an overseas education. So I think that's the underlying focus, is to think about the underlying business opportunity. How will you access that? And once you have figured that out, then there are usually fairly creative ways to manage and deal with the regulatory environment, as opposed to simply waiting for that to change, because you could go fairly blue in the face if you waited for the regulations to change on their own.
Pavan Gandhok, thanks for joining the program.
It's a pleasure.